Hello folks, welcome back. In this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and see what is the difference between a static and a non-static variable. In a previous lecture, we have talked about static and non-static method. In this lecture, we're going to talk about static and non-static variable. So just by using a static keyword in front of the variable makes it a static variable. So let's say we have a class called dog. So we create a class called dog here. And let's say in the dog class, we have a non-static variable called name, which tracks the name of the dog. And we also create a static variable called as static int count. Now, if we create two objects of this dog class, so we can say dog d1 is equals to new of dog. And similarly, we're going to go ahead and say dog d2 is equals to new of dog. I'm sorry about the handwriting. So we have created two different objects here for this class. Now let's look at the memory diagram. So in the memory, what will happen is it will create two objects, d1 and d2. So we create two dog objects. One will be referenced by d1, the other one will be referenced by d2. Now each of these objects will have its own copy of the name, because name is a non-static variable. So this particular dog will have its own name, and this particular dog will have its own name. So we can say that in non-static variable, each of the objects will have its own copy of that variable. But if we talk about a static variable, only one copy of that variable is available, and that will be shared among the objects of that particular class. So if d1 has set the value of this count variable to be 1, the d2 will see the same value. D2 cannot have its own, it cannot set its own copy, because there is only one copy of that variable will be present. So I repeat, a static variable is a variable which will be shared among all the objects of the class, and if one of the object has incremented or changed the value of the static variable, all the other objects will see the changed value. Whereas in case of non-static variable, each of the objects will have their own copy independent of the others. So that is what the difference between a static and a non-static variable. Now let me explain you with an example here. So let's create a new class called cat class. Click OK. And in this particular cat class, let's say I have a variable, a non-static variable called name, and I have another variable which is a static variable. Let's say it's count. Now I will go ahead and create an object of this particular class, cat class c1 is equals to new of cat class, and then I can create another object of this, call it as c2. Now to call it static variable, you need to use class name, not the object name. So here, not the reference variable. So if I wanted to call the name variable, so I can use c1 dot of name. But if I wanted to call the static variable, so I have to use the class name. So if I wanted to call the count variable, I have to say cat class dot of count is equals to 1. And similarly here I can say create another value for c2 dot of name, which is, let's say, is Stuffy. Now if I wanted to go ahead and display system dot of debug d1 name, that will be c1 name is going to be this. And similarly here system dot of debug c2 name, and that's going to be c2 dot of name. Now if I increase the value of cat class dot count, I can always go ahead and do an increment operator here. And now if I see the new value, I can just do system dot of debug count value, and then I can say cat class dot of count. So a static variable will always be referenced with the class name, not by the objects, because it's a class variable. So you can think like instance variables are the ones that have each of the instance will have its own copies of the variable, whereas in the case of the static variable, it is called as a class variable because it belongs to the class, and there is only one copy of that variable is there. So now if I go back here and execute this, what should be the output of this program? Here this particular c1 dot of name is what? It's Scooby. c2 dot of name is Stuffy. Now what is the cat class dot count value? It is equals to 1. Now I have incremented the value here, so the new value of the cat class dot count will be 2. So if I go back here and execute, I'm missing a semicolon, that's here. Go ahead and execute this. Oh, sorry, this is going to be integer. I always get confused because I have Java and Salesforce, so that's why I always get confused here. Sometimes I forget to put integer. Okay, so now let's look at the output of the program. So here, if I go ahead and do debug only, it's going to say Scooby, Tuffy, and count value is equals to 2. So this is the difference between a static and a non-static variable.